Hi there, welcome to this UDIA podcast. I'm the National President, Oscar Stanley, and I'm very pleased to be here today with the Federal Minister of Housing, Clare O'Neil. Few issues, as we know, are impacting Australian life as housing is today. Affordability, supply, and the embedded aspiration of home ownership. It's become one of the defining economic, political, and of course social challenges facing our country. It impacts everything from the cost of living to how people actually think and plan ahead for their own family structure. So I'm so pleased to be joined here today by the Federal Housing Minister, Clare O'Neil, for what is, I hope, a very important conversation where Australia's housing system can be outlined as to where it's heading, what reforms are coming next from the federal government, and whether we can genuinely maintain the dream of home ownership for the next generation. Thank you for having me, Clare.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Oscar, and thanks for all the great partnership of the UDIA in the work that we're doing. We're really grateful for it.
Thank you. And I feel as though, we're really in a profound position at the moment with housing, and particularly your speech you made last week to the National Press Club. I thought it really captured a lot of the key themes that obviously as a federal housing minister you're looking to adopt and push through to ensure that housing supply is brought on. So would love to investigate some of those questions with you today.
Wonderful.
And probably just to kick off the top, I really thought you spoke passionately about aspiration and how housing ownership is really part of the Australian DNA. So just, I think that came across really genuinely, and I think that obviously helps you, speak to policy and how the federal government can impact housing supply. So just would love you to reflect on that from your speech last week.
Yeah. Look, as Housing Minister, I get to see all of the pain that this causes Australians. We've had a housing crisis in Australia building for really 40 years, and it's really causing agony for people. When I think about the impacts, I think about that share of our population who are increasingly without a roof over their head. I think about young renters who are just watching this get further and further away from them as they're stuck in rent traps. And I think certainly about that younger generation of first home buyers who are, for lower income people, half as likely to own their own home as they were in the year that I was born.
Yeah.
But it's important not to just focus on the negatives, because your members know when we get housing right, it changes lives for the better.
Absolutely.
And I get to meet people who've been homeless and gotten a second chance because of a home our government built for them. I get to talk to young people who've got that life-changing aspiration realised of getting into a home of their own, and I want to see more and more of that. And if I just finish by saying on that, I got into politics to try to help people and improve the lives of as many people as I can across our country. If you want to see Australia have a bright future, housing's the place to be. This is the biggest challenge our country faces, in my view. And I hope your members see that we've got 3 levels of government for the first time ever since the post-war period actually focused on the right thing, which is building, building, building.
That's fabulous. And I think that was kind of striking argument as part of your speech. There's not one particular element of the housing process that's broken. It's actually a combination of many things.
Yeah, exactly. As I think, why do we have such a difficult problem? 3 levels of government involved, and if you look at anything our country does where there's 3 levels of government involved, it tends not to be done very well. But also, it's not just one failing system, it's multiple failing systems. And your members are at the front line of it. They're actually experiencing every day how much harder things have gotten even in the last 20 years. So that's why so much of our agenda is actually about pulling back from the over-regulation of what your members are trying to do and let them do the thing they're really good at, which is design and build beautiful homes for Australians.
And I think you also spoke to just the thicket of red and green tape that we've created around building a house.
Yeah.
I noted in your speech that you were actually pulling together for the first time, I believe, planning, housing ministers, everyone from around the countryside to align them, I guess, to the housing accord and what needs to be achieved. How did that go? How was the meeting, and how do you feel like that alignment has gone?
Really fruitful conversation with the states, and they're very cognizant, as I am, of the fact that in a very well-meaning way, over 40 years, 3 levels of government have often they're trying to create non-housing outcomes by regulating housing around energy efficiency, around disability access. All of these things matter greatly. But when you've got three well-meaning levels of government all trying to do it at the same time, you end up with what we have right now, which is an administrative nightmare for the country's builders. I'm a Labor politician. I probably don't enter most debates assuming that red tape and regulation are part of the problem. I cannot believe what builders and developers around our country have to put up with just to get a home built. We actually want more housing to be built, not less of it, and we absolutely need to strip this back. So things like the National Construction Code, I think people would be really surprised out there how much the National Construction Code is adding to the regulatory burden. It's not just the code itself, it's a certification process involved in what has to happen. Planning rules and regulations, approvals, all of these things, they need to be sorted out. Now, it's not a simple thing to do. And as you know, unfortunately, most of these things sit at the state level and are not completely within my control. But one of the things that's really good is our government putting money on the table to get reform done at the state level. In the budget, we secured $2 billion for last mile infrastructure. That will be wonderful for your members to get them building housing in the way that we want. That's dependent on states engaging in another series of reforms around planning and red tape removal.
Yeah, and certainly I know that the interaction through our national housing pipeline, your department, and ensuring that we can provide the guidance as to where we think that money is best spent. And we certainly, the infrastructure, enabling infrastructure, roads and sewer and these things, we appreciate that they're not, the big, kind of tape cutting moments, but at the same time, it is genuine in its impact on housing.
Oh, and completely. So, I think I got to sign my name on a water pipe that went into the ground a couple of years ago. But look, UDIA have been great in making sure that this is at the forefront of the debate. Really, our government is saying we see the feasibility problem that sits at the heart of what's going on with housing at the moment. The truth is that there's a lot of housing in our country that on the economics of 10 years ago would have been under construction that can't get built today because like the selling price and the building costs just aren't meeting up. This is our big contribution to that, billions and billions of dollars going into last mile infrastructure. So your members basically don't have to pay for it.
Well, it certainly is welcomed, and thanks for listening. And obviously, putting that also alongside the environmental approvals focus, which we know sometimes that EPBC process at a federal level has held up development. And getting that balance right, I think, is very important.
Yeah, well, I think no one should believe that we're getting better environmental protection because things are slow and congested. That those things aren't. That's not just the way to look at it. We've had broken federal environmental laws for a long time. They haven't been working for business, haven't been working for housing, haven't been working for the environment. So the work Murray Watt and I have done is really, if you don't mind me saying, it's really outstanding. We said we'd processed 26,000 applications that were stuck in the backlog in a year. Actually, we've done 35,000 and we're 9 months into the process, and there's a long way to go here. We've got to get environmental approvals that protect the environment but give real clarity and speed to developers, and I think we're heading in a really positive direction there.
Oh, agreed. And I think we've actually had that feedback from members around a bit of a cultural shift maybe in the department, and certainly the numbers speak for themselves as to what's coming through.
And you mentioned culture, Oscar. That's a really important piece of the puzzle. So when you've worked in government, you probably really see this. The rules matter, they matter enormously, but culture is very important too. And the clear message that public servants across our government have is we are pro-supply. We're not going to get more affordable housing in our country until we're building more homes for Australians. Yeah,
that's fabulous. You've also been quite hands-on with industry with the recent fuel crisis.
Yeah.
Another thing to deal with, and I know you've been very proactive in understanding what is the impact on housing and how's that going to flow through to the plans to build 1.2 million homes.
You're probably getting sick of meeting with me about it, Oscar.
Listen, it's one meeting I would happily take, but it's been an interesting discussion, and the proactive nature, I think, of the federal government trying to understand it and see where they can assist industry, because it is hard, and there's certain parts of the market that are impacted more than others. But can you just potentially reflect on just the view from here and how you think that could play out over the next year?
Yeah, speculating about what's going to happen with the Iran war is not a sport I'm going to get into. There's a lot that we can't perfectly predict. But I can share with your members just the journey that I've seen the sector go on, which was, I think, an initial few weeks of really serious concern. I think the sector's sort of wearing the battle scars a little bit of what happened post-COVID, and it's in very recent memory that we had, businesses falling over because of just all of the issues of construction costs and home builder, and you know about all this. So what I saw though very quickly was the leaders of the sector taking a breath and putting their problem-solving caps on and actually finding alternative supply chains, finding different ways to do things, and basically working through a lot of the issues. So I was quite interested at our first couple of meetings. It was, a lot of agitation, thinking about what government can do, and quite quickly the sector became, okay, we're going to be able to manage this, but yes, it will have impacts. The most important thing the Commonwealth can do about this is try to secure fuel supplies for the country. Construction's affected because it's the second biggest user of diesel in Australia's economy.
Yes.
And you've seen the PM talking to world leaders around the world, trying to get us to the front of the queue, and he's actually done it. I mean, whatever, I'm sure we've got lots of people watching who love Anthony Albanese and perhaps some who don't. He's done a damn good job of making sure that we continue to get fuel flowing into the country, and that's exactly what was needed.
Yeah, and I think just the understanding from government that there's a huge amount of effort and process that actually establishes the block of land that then the builder obviously comes and commences construction on. And I think sometimes what happens below the surface is forgotten. And I know your engagement with the civil contractors that are really feeling it has been genuine.
Oh, they're so crucial to all of this.
Yes.
Yeah, people don't realise like the complexity and the layering of what goes into getting a home built in this country, but they're crucial.
Changing speeds just for a second with the budget. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion and debate around the impacts of the changes to CGT and obviously negative gearing. Overall, we think that, preserving the benefit to allow investment to flow into new housing is a positive impact on supply. Any changes in a structure on how to invest obviously has a moment of maybe pause, and there might be an impact in the short term while people understand the changes. But can you just talk to the modelling and what you see as a benefit that will flow and how it will impact supply over the next years for the industry?
I think first, let's just take a step back and look at this as Australians, not people involved in housing and construction particularly. We've got home ownership rates falling through the floor for young people around this country, and a housing tax set of settings which has massively overcompensated property investors in existing dwellings. And when you look at the chart of what's happened over the last 20 years in terms of how many investors have actually come out of the share market and rushed into property because of what the tax settings did, it's not defensible in a country where we want home ownership properties, home ownership opportunities available to everyone. And I think for a lot of your members, they would absolutely agree with that. As Australians, as parents, as grandparents, as I'm sure many of them are. So these are the right reforms for the country and put first home buyers on a level playing field with investors. What we're doing is making sure we make that change for fairness and for prosperity and aspiration for our country in a way that provides kind of the smoothest transition for the sector. So a few things. Remember that those negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions will still be available to new property.
Yes.
So if you're listening right now and you want to be a property investor, we'll back you 100%, but we want you to build a new home for the country. We've also got in the budget that $2 billion of last mile infrastructure that we estimated would build 65,000 new homes. I think UDIA had an even more optimistic set of numbers on that.
Yeah.
And that's on top of all the other things we're doing for home building. So I'm really confident that the supply issue over time we will defeat it as a UDIA and as our government works with state and territory and local governments. But it's a really difficult problem for the country.
Yeah, and I think that's the critical piece of this is that the supply levers have to be cleanly in place as if we're pushing obviously the interest across, and there's a big amount of capital that obviously had previously been invested in established which will come over. And that's where I think this critical role that the federal government plays to ensure that alignment's through all levels of government to ensure what's happening on the ground allows it to not impact obviously rents and price.
Oh,
price
completely,
increases.
And I think I haven't also just reiterated, because those existing tax concessions will remain on people providing rental properties and who already own properties of their own, all the Treasury modelling tells us that the impacts will be very moderate, very minor, especially when it comes to rents. Look, I think this is absolutely the right change for the country, and what I really am interested to see is what happens in the medium term in terms of investor demand for new dwellings. My expectation is we're going to start to see lots of focus for home builders on selling into investors, and that's a good thing for home building.
Yep, great. There was also a announcement last week around an investment into prefabrication of housing.
Yeah.
And I think, it's an obvious evolution for us. I think, you noted that overseas, innovation has kind of run ahead of Australia. My personal view is that, the building industry is quite efficient. And so, there's obviously a need for volume to ensure that the pricing can get to where it is feasible for these types of prefabricated homes to be produced. Just give us an idea around how that money is going to be invested, the selection of, where that obviously capital will flow to support the industry.
Yeah, it's one of a few things our government's done to push the accelerator on innovation in housing. But my main message to your listeners is that we're really just getting started on this. I do genuinely believe this is one of the big pieces of the puzzle in terms of getting us out of the 40-year-old housing challenges that we've had. You mentioned those stats around innovation. Somewhere around 80% of new dwellings in Sweden are being built using modern methods of construction. It's about 5% in Australia.
Yeah.
And I think one of the challenges we've got is the pipeline. So if you're going to build housing in a factory, you can't turn it on and off the way you can with a site. So a pipeline's an issue. But the other thing that's really interesting about construction in Australia is the strong predominance of very small construction companies. The average size of a construction company in Australia is fewer than 2 employees. And so when you've got a small business like that, they do fabulous, fast work building quality homes, but you don't have an R&D department that can think about how you're going to adopt new ways of doing things.
Yep.
So that just tells me that the government's got to play a bit more of a role here. We announced in the budget $40 million, which is about expanding something called the kit of parts approach. That is a project that's been run out of New South Wales, where effectively a whole lot of innovators have come together and said, how can we robustly build a house using a sort of pod approach where we take apart the sort of standardized aspects of a house and just build them. So this is a model where these designs are open for anyone to use. It's partly been funded through government. It's really clever. It's being used in a lot of social housing in New South Wales. And one of the really good things about it, as well as fast builds, is it's very durable, and for social housing, which can take a lot of wear and tear, you could actually detach a pod and replace it with a new one without knocking the house down and starting again.
Yeah, clever.
So it's actually got a heap of really good attributes, a great starting point, but I reckon there's a lot more we can do across the country on housing innovation, and that's something I'm turning to next after we finish the tax changes.
Fabulous. Minister, there was a statement, a poignant statement in your speech, that Australia is at risk of becoming a country where home ownership depends more on inherited wealth than how hard you work. Do you believe this next decade is a defining decade to see whether we head down a European model or stay true to the Australian dream?
I think it's a defining decade. I really do believe that. I was raised to believe that Australia was the best country in the world because this was a nation where opportunity was for everyone. And back when I was born, home ownership was pretty much for everyone.
Yeah.
If you played by the rules, you did the right thing and you were frugal, likelihood was that you were going to be in a home of your own. That has changed.
Yeah.
We've got young people in this country on 2 good incomes who cannot crack into the market until they're perhaps in their 40s. We've got a generation of young people telling us they are putting off the decision to have children or having fewer children because housing is such a problem for them.
Yeah.
And this comes back to where we started. Housing is so crucial. This is not just about, the bricks and mortar. This is about opportunity and aspiration in our nation. And for the first time in 70 years, we've got a Commonwealth government that is throwing everything at this problem, getting the states together, corralling local government, doing all that work, And this is the moment. We've got to get this done now, because anytime you know politics as I do, we're going to have a change of government and go back to the Commonwealth being crouched in a ball, not doing anything, not making any policy change, and just kind of pretending that they've got no leadership role here. That won't be good for the country. I really believe this is the time for us to try to really get a handle on this problem. And I hope you see the passion and conviction with which our government's tackling it.
Well, Minister, I do, and I think the interaction that we have, I think, demonstrates that, and I hope that our members also see that, you know, you are really got a hand on the wheel and pushing passionately towards housing supply, which is what we're here to help with. So, you know, if anything from my perspective, you know, let's continue that industry engagement. I think, you know, the conversation is genuine, and everyone around Australia that are members of UDIA are behind you and pushing forward with this huge challenge ahead of us. I wouldn't mind just, you know, ending on an optimistic kind of view. So, you know, have you got, can you describe to me what in 5 years' time, if all these policies that you're putting in place and these bold decisions are in place, you know, what does it look like to you? How will you reflect upon this moment?
It will be rising home ownership rates. It'll be our country being able to build more homes. And this is so crucial. Your members will have heard about our aspiration to try to build 1.2 million homes. That is a real aspiration, but it is also a driving target for us to address the capacity we have as a country to build housing.
Yep.
So we need to build more homes for Australians. And I want to see governments around the country recapture their role in building social and affordable housing. If there's one thing, you know, the most distressing sign of the housing crisis is in my local park, what I can see, a growing number of people who literally are without a roof over their head, and that should not be happening in Australia. So I think if we're moving in the right direction on those three metrics, it'll be a strong showing.
Fabulous. Well, let's hope we see that. And Minister, thank you for your time and the ongoing engagement with UDIA. Thank you.
Thanks, Oscar. Really appreciate it.